there are so many people I know who are otherwise intelligent people, but they still have this Trump derangement syndrome, which is real. I had it. I know what it
It
feels
is.
like.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and all they can think about is abortion and in issues that, I'm sorry, in California, you're never going to have to worry about that. We now have a constitutional right to abortion from
Yep.
start to finish of pregnancy. But they just
Yeah.
can't think about anything else. They don't think about the economy or their own children. And so I don't know how to reach those people.
It's time for the Michele Tafoya podcast.
Julie Hamill is an attorney. She's lived in California all of her life, outside of the 4 years she left for law school in Washington, D.C. So she's been exposed to a lot of different kinds of people, but a lot of the same points of view. This story is really reflective of a lot of what has gone on in America, in many households, maybe even your own, certainly in mine, since 2016. I encourage you to listen to her. She is a breath of fresh air, and she's really humble about how her mind has evolved. Let's put it that way. You're going to hear from Julie Hamill. In the meantime, let me encourage you to please subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Never miss an episode. We work really hard on finding really interesting guests and topics that are relevant and important to the day. So we hope that you'll keep us in your podcast library. So subscribe, give us a review, whatever you need to do. Julie Hamill is a name I have a feeling you'll be hearing more of. In the meantime, just enjoy her for who and what she is as we talk to her next. Julie, when I found you on X and started reading some of your posts, I thought, okay, there are a lot of parallels in our lives here. You are in Southern California, correct?
I am, yes.
Yeah. Which is where I was born and raised. Obviously no longer live there, but lived there the first half of my life. And I would say too, that at a certain point, I mean, I probably was a self-described liberal. I went to Cal Berkeley, so kind of by default, but not everyone, so some people are surprised that I got out of there and became conservative. I think I've always been conservative, but just, there are certain issues that I think women glom onto as women that really kind of overtake all our other sensibilities about politics. And I'm sure we probably share some of them. But I love this post you wrote, and this is when I got to interview this woman. You said, I voted for Obama, Clinton, and Biden. I was never a member of either party, but I was a raging liberal in the classic sense. So not illiberal, liberal. Bodily autonomy and staying out of people's personal lives are principles of government I've always firmly believed in. So then, I mean, this kind of trickled into this whole story of this evolution you went through. So take us through it from that last time that you voted Obama, Clinton, Biden. You cried in 2016 when Trump won. And then what happened?
And it's so embarrassing. It was embarrassing for me to write that. And I'm embarrassed to admit, well, it's embarrassing to admit that I cried when Trump was elected. Looking back on it now, it just seems so ridiculous. And then I think one of the things that I'm most embarrassed and ashamed of is the estrangement from my dad, which thankfully, we have reconnected. But I allowed politics and narratives to really dominate my thinking in every aspect of my life. And so I think it was important, even though I was embarrassed and ashamed to admit all of these things, because I see this in my own family and I see it in all of my friends' families. I think it's really important to talk about it and to try and help people sort of heal these divisions that have come up, I think, a lot since 2016. But before 2016, it's a long story. I mean, I could talk for hours, but I was aware of politics. I've been in California most of my life with, a 4-year stint in DC for law school. But I was never a Democrat. I was never a Republican. I knew California had issues politically, we're a super majority Democrat state, and our legislature is absolutely out of control and insane.
Out of control, yes.
It's scary. And I think if
Yeah,
people
it's sad.
actually watched what's happening in the legislature, if you watch one legislative session, your mind is going to be blown. I mean, people need to pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
But so back in when Trump got elected, the media that I consumed was CNN, NPR. I used Facebook. I used Instagram, but I didn't realize how much my thinking was controlled by all of these sources. Now looking back, it's very obvious. But Facebook, I think, was the biggest culprit because it enabled these echo chambers where I was talking to like-minded people and people who were far to the left of me, but no one to the right. And there was a group called Law Mamas, which has gotten a lot of attention over the years from various people because it was like this incubator of just radical progressive ideology. And early on, there was what's interesting is the woman who's now working under George Gascon, who is Los Angeles County's district attorney. He hired this woman, Tiffany. She's one of the Law Mamas. And she was this abolitionist. She wants to abolish the police, sort of criminal defense attorney that he's put up into the highest rank. I think she's his chief of staff now in the district attorney's office. And I think that that's just perfectly representative of the mindset of this Law Mamas group, because we were all talking about, anti-racism and all of this really radical, woke, progressive stuff before it hit the mainstream. And I just thought it was normal. I thought we were really smart and we were, on the cutting edge of policy in the United States. And I was so much more intelligent and morally superior to everyone else. And really humble too. But my dad, he has always been conservative and sort of an unapologetic Republican. He left California around 2017 to go to Idaho, and it really hurt me. And I didn't understand the political reasons behind it or the financial reasons behind it. For me, it felt like he wanted to go be a Republican in this very Republican conservative state, and he wanted to have all of his guns. And that was sort of my thinking about all of it. And it was very upsetting to me. And I thought that his support of Trump was, I believed at that time that Trump was this racist, horrible, demonic person that he was being painted to be by CNN and NPR and my contacts on Facebook. That was the only information that I was receiving. And so, as I wrote in my post, in 2019, we got into an argument, my dad and I, on Thanksgiving. And my dad was saying something about the deep state. And I just said, I don't remember what I said, but it wasn't nice. And I told him he was nuts. And I thought
he was like this conspiracy theorist, tin hat wearing, aluminum foil hat wearing guy who's like, oh, it's about the deep state. And I'll tell you something too. There was a time, Julie, where I was more in your camp along that. Like I'd hear this term deep state and it sounded so sinister. And how could that possibly happen in America? Well, guess what? If it can happen anywhere on earth, it can happen here because we're all human beings, and there are corrupt human beings and there are good human beings. And so, but this is, I'm seeing you're painting this picture of a Thanksgiving and daughter and dad get in a fight over the deep state. And it's almost, it's becoming a very common story.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately we had, I said some terrible things to him that I absolutely regret and I've since apologized for. But we stopped speaking. We stopped speaking for a good year and a half, 2 years. And I lost significant time with my dad because I was so emotional about my position with respect to Donald Trump and the deep state and politics. And I let that dominate my mind and my emotions. And instead of prioritizing this family bond, this relationship with my father, which is the most important relationship, one of the most important relationships in my life, I prioritized politics. And it makes me sick to sort of look back and think about that. But I know so many people who do that.
Your story, it happened in my family as well. My mom voted for Trump, and there were other family members who simply could not forgive her for that. They found it unforgivable, where I thought, come on. At the time, she was, 87 years old. She believed what she believed. She was a conservative. Let her vote the way she wants to vote. But at the same time, I hope you give yourself some grace, because you were not alone. And I think the reason we get emotional about politics is because politics represent our values in many, many ways. I think sometimes we give too much weight to certain values because of life experiences or lack thereof, that we haven't seen the full spectrum of problems in the world. I want you to, is there a pivot point, a moment where you thought, maybe I was wrong on the politics? Maybe I was, because it sounds to me like it wasn't just, I want to mend fences with my dad, but the fact that you were able to indicates to me that maybe there were some other changes going on in your thinking.
Yes. So, as we all know, March of 2020, which was just a few months after this fight that I had with my dad, COVID hit, and our government, especially the LA County local government and the state of California, imposed these insanely authoritarian policies.
I know so many people who have trouble sleeping, whether it's the stress of current events, it's the stress of their life, the stress of inflation, whatever it is, we all have trouble sleeping. I'm included in that. But let me tell you what I found to help me sleep better. And I'm telling you, this stuff works for me. It's not a drug. It's not a prescription. It's a cream. And I put it on at bedtime, and it's simple. And let me tell you something. I was a total skeptic, but after trying it once, I was amazed that it really works. I sleep so much better. The company is Sleep Cream. They use all natural CBD combined with the finest essential oils. They have different scents that I really like, the rose in particular. So I just put it on before turning in for the evening. I usually put it on the bottoms of my feet or the insides of my forearms, and that's what works best for me. And then within minutes, I feel relaxed and my body is allowed to do what it's supposed to do, which is go to sleep. You can find them at sleepcream.com, sleepcreme.com. Just try Sleep Cream for a couple nights. See if it works for you as well as it does for me. And if you don't experience better sleep, Sleep Cream will refund your purchase, guaranteed. You don't even have to return anything. Go to sleepcream.com. That's sleepcream.com, with cream spelled CREME.com. And for the next few weeks, use the code GAMEDAY at checkout to save $20 off your first order. That's GAMEDAY at checkout. All one word, GAMEDAY, for $20 in savings. Are you ready for the best sleep ever? Sleep, CREME.com.
And I think at the beginning, everyone was just trying to figure out what was going on. Nobody really knew how to handle it. But then I think we can look to Ron DeSantis in Florida and see what he did and how quickly he was able to sort of pivot to reality and listen to people like Joseph Ladapo and people who are being real and realistic and honest with facts and statistics. But anyway, so I have 3 little kids. They're now 10, 8, and 5. And at the time, my baby was 9 months old. And the older 2 were 5 and 3. And these policies that kept them out of school, that kept people separate from each other and sort of terrified everyone out of human connection, were really harming my children. And I watched my 5-year-old, he looked like he was becoming depressed, like a 5-year-old child. And I was not able to work, obviously, without childcare. And so I started, it took me a while to get to this point. because at first I was scared too. We were bleaching our groceries and being ridiculous because that was what we were being fed by the media. So I started to speak out publicly in the fall of 2021. And the reaction and the responses that I got from my social community and then from broader the government was really eye-opening for me. It was the first time where I sort of like stepped out of the tribe and said something that was not aligned with the accepted discussion or the accepted discourse. Like in that Law Mamas group, I suggested, hey, like, why don't we strategize a way to convert our elementary schools into childcare facilities so that we can actually get our kids back into school? And when I said that, I had like 100 women come after me as this racist granny killer. It was the first time anybody ever called me racist. I said nothing about race, but apparently at that time, the desire to put children back into school was racist for whatever reason. So these insults that had been used against Trump and Trump supporters for the previous 4 years of my life were suddenly now being lobbed at me. And I'm going, well, I'm not a racist, but all these people are convinced that I am. And they're talking about me as if I am. And that was eye-opening. And then sort of long story short, I ended up suing LA County Department of Public Health. And they weaponized tax dollars. They've got a $2 billion budget. And they used that to come at me in legal and personal ways. And so, I had sorry?
How so? How did they come after you?
I mean, there was the typical litigation, the burying me in paper. It was me versus Shepard Mullen, Orrick, and White and Case because I had subpoenaed Twitter and Meta. And so it was me working from my house battling these three big law firms. So I'm buried in paper. That's fine. That's sort of how the things work. But then the attorneys for the county pulled photos of my children from my school board campaign website and put them into the court record. And this was after, and this was just one example in a long line of things that they did to harass me and to harass my clients and intimidate us. And it was just a group of moms. It was moms of young children who were just trying to fight against illegal mandates. And then it was a free speech issue as well. It's a long story. But once I experienced that and saw what the government does to people who dissent or who express a view that is counter to whatever objective they have or whatever policy they're trying to achieve, that was all I needed to see. And I sort of realized the way that the media works with the government. And so then those deep state comments that my dad had made didn't seem so far-fetched anymore because I was now seeing how nasty and dark and authoritarian my own government was behaving toward me. So, there were a lot of things. It had to
have been, forgive me for interrupting, an incredible wake-up call, but also sort of a scary one, because when you do trust your government, as we've all sort of been brought up to do, and have faith in them, and it can be at any level, whether it's respecting police officers or, going to a city council meeting or voting, whatever it is, you think America, this could never happen here. But again, I would say it happens worldwide. It can happen anywhere. And when we're not watching, that's when it kind of slowly takes root. So you have this realization, and boy, I can't imagine what that did to you or how that changed you. Was it like a bright light over your head, or was it more just this sort of slow boil that you just kind of went, all right?
It was a slow trickle. And I remember standing in my yard, and my yard sort of butts up to a busy road. And so I can hear the road noise. And I'm gardening. I had bought chickens. I went full survivalist. I was trying to plant edible food in my house and my garden and raise chickens. So I'm, doing my gardening, and I heard this pack of motorcyclists just revving their engines and being super loud and going down the street. And normally that would bother me, but I had this revelation and I was like, those people sound like they're just in search of freedom. Like we're all being locked down in our homes at that point. We weren't allowed to go to the beach. We couldn't go outside. I remember that. Yeah. You couldn't do anything. And and I remember thinking at that point, I was like, God, I get it. Like I understand remember how it was controversial to want to seek freedom. Like if you talked about freedom at that time, you were like a crazy MAGA person.
Yes.
And I was thinking, no, they're not crazy. They're being locked in their homes and they are in pursuit of freedom. And I get it. And I remember trying to talk to my husband about it. And he was like, are you a fan of Donald Trump or his followers? And I was like, no. I can understand where they're coming from. Like I get this need for freedom. The government is locking us in our homes. And it took a few months to get to the point of being able to have more open conversations because the subject was so forbidden. It was
taboo. It was. I remember, listen, I was still working in sports at the time and we did that COVID NFL season. And I remember posting on Facebook an article that was written, not by me. I posted an article written by somebody else about how these other medical protocols might actually help prevent. And because Fauci and company had already said, no. And this guy was saying, well, it might be worth another look. And I posted the article and I was called a racist as well. And many other names for posting an article. And people were like laughing, like saying, ha, 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 you're drinking the Kool-Aid, you're this, that, and the other. And I thought, this is freaking un-American. This is bizarre. Like I can't post an article without being just taken to the woodshed for it. It was remarkable.
Well, and that is how the government controls the narrative. And something that I left out of my experience in that lawsuit, I subpoenaed Twitter, which had then become X Corp. And they dropped about 20,000 pages of documents on me. And some of those documents were exchanges between a very high-powered congressman's staffers and Twitter executives. So the head of U.S. public policy for Twitter. And they were censorship. It was censorship efforts. It was repeated demands and requests to censor people who opposed mask mandates, who opposed vaccine mandates, who spoke about things like you were just talking about. And there were some instances where X did not comply, but there were many instances where those posts were deboosted and some people lost their accounts. Unfortunately, X moved to seal those records. So they're still under seal and I can't show them to anyone without the seal being lifted. So I don't know if Elon Musk follows you, but it would be great if we could get those documents unsealed.
Yeah, it could. I would encourage you to post and post and post again and tag him on all of those posts. Eventually someone in his sphere is going to notice.
Okay, I'll do that.
Hey, if you're feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance and you've had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars, you might want to take a look at Share Right. Healthcare done the right way. At Share Right, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community. And forget about paying excessive premiums. With Share Right, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. Now think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. Share Right ensures you have access to the care you deserve precisely when you need it. From routine checkups to unexpected emergencies, with Share Right, your healthcare is their top priority. Empower yourself today by taking control of your healthcare costs. Visit shareright.org/Tafoya to learn more and see how much you can save. Visit ShareRight, ShareRight.org/Tafoya. That's shareright.org/TAFOYA for healthcare done the right way. So now here we are, we're in 2024, You had voted for Biden in 2020. And here we are with this choice again. And what we've seen, if people weren't convinced before that, we're not, it's not just about the power of the people, that people like Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama and George Clooney had more of a say in who would become the next presidential candidate than we did. I mean, there it is. We all saw it unfold in real time. And look, there are people who want to support Kamala Harris. That's fine. This is America. So far, so good. But now we've had this comparison of these side-by-side administrations. We saw what Trump did before COVID hit, and we saw what the Biden-Harris administration has done for the last 4 years. So how much of that, these last 4 years now, has impacted the way you see your choices now?
I see, before even knowing who the nominees were going to be, because I live in this supermajority Democrat state, in a supermajority Democrat county, and I see the authoritarian nature of the Democratic Party when they have full control. I'm a hard no on the Democratic Party. That's my hardline stance.
Okay.
But then if you look at the record and you look at what they've done, it's a no-brainer. I mean, you look at the border and how many people they have let in. And something that hasn't come out in these debates is, Kamala tries to say, Congress needs to pass this bill. But she's ignoring the fact that the Biden Department of Justice actively sued Texas multiple times when Texas was trying to close its own border. They cut open the fence and let people in while Texas was trying to close it. Like, these are executive decisions made by the Biden-Harris administration that really harm our society because resources are finite. It's not racism. We have finite resources in this country. Yeah. We need to serve the American people before we allow millions of additional people in who also are going to need services. It's a math problem. So
it's a big math problem, especially when you consider that not only are they being let in, they're being financially supported by the taxpayer.
Exactly. And then you look, like in my state, we have all of these magnet policies and all of these policies that send a ton of money to illegal immigrants, healthcare, housing, all of this stuff. And in the meantime, in my school district, I live in a wealthy district. So we get the least amount of money from the state because they allocate it based on local wealth. Our buildings are collapsing. They are falling apart. We cannot afford to fix our school buildings. Yet our government is giving all of this money to people who come in illegally. So, and then you look at the homelessness policies, $24 billion spent on homelessness from 2018 to 2022, and the numbers have just increased. And so I look at the way that our government spends this money, and it's bleeding heart Democrat policies. Like, well, we have to take care of the people. So we're going to do harm reduction. We're going to give them free paraphernalia to use their drugs safely. And we're going to give them housing first. We're not going to make them get clean. And so we're going to pay. Santa Monica built a housing facility that's $1 million plus per unit, per person, for homeless housing on the beach. Like, that's how our government is spending the money. Meanwhile, American children.
Well, I mean, everyone should have access to the beach, shouldn't they? Even though the neighbors had to pay their own money for that beachfront property, why should we keep everybody from the beach? I mean, they have diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have to include everyone at the beach.
It's a human right.
It's the beachfront property is a human right. Yeah. It makes me so sad. As I told you, I grew up in California. My mom lived her entire life in California. Both my parents died in their home in California, in Manhattan Beach, which is not far from you. And I'm not going to say where you are, but to see the state become what it's become is absolutely tragic. Let me ask you this before we finish off here. You are one person in this supermajority Democrat state, but clearly you're smart enough. You're open. Let me put it this way: you're open-minded and wise enough to see what's unfolded and to react accordingly. Do you know anyone else who has?
A small circle of people who I know. But what it took for me was real serious personal suffering and witnessing the suffering of my children. That is what it took for me to open my mind and change my mind. And had I not experienced that level of suffering, I don't know if my mind would have changed, if I would have come around. And so that makes me nervous because there are so many people I know who are otherwise intelligent people, but they still have this Trump derangement syndrome, which is real. I had it. I know what it feels like.
Yeah.
And all they can think about is abortion and in issues that, I'm sorry, in California, you're never going to have to worry about that. We now have a constitutional right to abortion from start to finish of pregnancy. But they just can't think about anything else. They don't think about the economy or their own children. And so I don't know how to reach those people.
Yeah. Well, I am willing to bet that you are reaching people because every time you speak, you just never know who's listening. And I had an experience like that where I was co-hosting on The View, and which we could do several shows on that. But I remember leaving New York one day after co-hosting The View, and I was just despondent. I thought that was the most miserable experience. And I wonder if anyone even heard a word I said. And it was like magic. I opened up Facebook or something, and I had a message from a guy who said, I'm 28 years old. I'm a gay man from Philadelphia. And you really changed my mind about some things today. And I still get goosebumps when I remember that one guy. And he might be the only mind I've ever changed or will ever change. But I have to believe then that he might change a mind. And so it's the old, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And it's going to take a long time, perhaps. But you give me really a good sense of hope and faith that there are smart, wise, open-minded people who are willing to say, maybe I was wrong. Now finish with, tell us this great, happy ending story about how you and your dad came back together.
Well, it's kind of, it's bittersweet, but he ended up getting diagnosed with cancer. It's prostate cancer. So it's a long-term prognosis. The prognosis is good. But as soon as I heard that, I'd been in the midst of my own awakening, and I just called him and I cried and I said, I'm so sorry. I just want to reconnect. And so we just moved on. But I've been invited to speak on Fox News at Night with Trace Gallagher on sort of a weekly basis for the last year or so. And which is just so funny, like coming from where I came from with this very liberal background, and all of my friends are horrified that I would dare speak to Fox News. But I got to bring
I love that they're horrified.
I brought my dad into the studio, and he got to meet Trace, and he got to meet Bill Malugin, and he had such a great time. And I feel like, now we have this great bond over Fox, and we have a lot of great discussions. And so our relationship has been mended, thankfully. But I still feel shame for that period of time where I let politics and perceived. The thing that really gets me is that so much of it is not even real. It's a fake narrative that I had fallen for, and it consumed me, and it consumed my ability to connect with the people who are most important in my life. And I hope that people watching or listening will take a deeper look. And if there are fractures in your family, or if you've lost touch with someone over politics, please reach out to them, because life is so short, and people are not their political identity or their perceived political identity.
Yeah. Yep. And I think ultimately, we probably share a lot of the same values with these same people, but somehow the media has become this really divisive arm of government that I truly resent. But like you, I appear on Fox regularly, and I think people like Trace and Bill Malugin is a fantastic reporter. Will probably never get the appreciation and accolades that he deserves because of what he reports on. But he is very, very, they're both very good at their jobs. But anyway, I am thrilled to meet you. I know we have other people in common. Jennifer Say, who's been on this show many times and who I work with on her XXXY campaign. So it's wonderful to have another connection with a like-minded person. And I hope you'll give yourself grace and let go of the shame, because as long as you hold on to that, you can't be fully present. So it's okay, Julie.
Thank you. It was so nice to talk to you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Likewise. I'm so, you know what? I end every show by saying, be brave and do good. And I think Julie Hamill is the personification of that. She found the courage to go on Fox, even when her friends are just like, you're what? So I give her major kudos for that. And you're doing good, Julie. And I hope to stay in touch with you.
Thank you.
Misinformation out there. And my point of it was basically, look, there's no one that knows more about a bias than I do, because I studied this issue for 50 years. And the same is also with the virus. There are people out there that are experts that study this year after year after year, and that are experienced, like Dr. Fauci, that has been in this, probably for his entire life. I mean, why would you not believe someone like that? So, and there's so many other scientists out there and experts on this subject. So I believe them and I follow them very carefully. And of course, sometimes things are happening that are unexpected. So then you have to make the adjustments and all that. But I think people should know there is a virus here. It kills people. And the only way we prevent it is to get vaccinated, to wear masks, to do social distancing, washing your hands all the time, and not just to think about, well, my freedom is being kind of disturbed here. No. Screw your freedom.